Hello, Tiffany here with Cards Crafty Creations. So today what I want to do is I got some new toys to play with, some new crafty toys to play with, and so I want to kind of spend the next few videos testing their capabilities and what they're capable of. So let me show you what I got. I actually got a actual Moleskine handmade crystal glass pen, and I've been seeing these kind of a lot from artists, and artists are using them to draw kind of like you would a dip pen, but it's made of glass and it has some ridges on it which soak up the ink onto the tip, and then as you use it the ink comes out. So I wanted to try this. I want to see how could us crafters use something like this. It's made for, like I said, people do it to sketch, and it's also for calligraphy as well. Also what I got was this India ink set. It's a Zococo Calligraphy India ink set, and it's actually mostly all primary colors, and it has actually a brown and a black. And they are metallic, so they have some metallic shimmers in them, so that adds just a little bit more sparkle to your writing. But like I said, I wanted to try and see what can we do with them as crafters or card makers or scrapbookers or travel journalers. It's got to have more function than just journaling. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Be Yourself stamp set from Simon Says Stamps, and I'm going to just stamp an image and try using the inks to color it in and see how far does the ink go, how vibrant is the ink, what kind of lines can I get with this glass pen, are they sharp, are they fat, can you vary the line size. So I'm going to be testing those to see, can we use them other than just writing something or drawing something. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here is a closer look at the Simon Says Stamp Be Yourself stamp set, and I'm going to be using the Be Yourself stamp along with a couple of the bees and the honeycombs. And what I'm going to do is just use the ink to try and color them and see how well the coloring is going to go, if it's going to bleed or pull in any of the black lined ink into the color and so forth. This is the actual ink set, and I'll be honest, I bought it because it has little animals on all of the ink jars, and so that was really intriguing to me. But they are very vibrant colors. They are, like I said, primary colors: green, blue, yellow, orange, pink, purple, red, brown, and black. And they actually have like metallic shimmers in them, so you do have to shake them up. So on this is the red color, and like I said, you shake it up to get the metallic in there, so when you do lay the color down it does shimmer a little bit. So for this we're going to be using the red, the yellow, and the black inks. What you're also going to need is you're going to just need a little jar of water, because between inks you'll want to clean your glass pen off. Now you don't have to clean it off every time you dip it into the color, but you will, if it dries up, you'll want to clean it again. This is the actual glass pen. I got it on Amazon. It was like $6 or $8 or something, nothing really major. And it's just a glass pen. They do have different types. There's some with straight nibs. This one kind of has like a teardrop shaped nib on the bottom, which is what you color with. And then I'll also have a piece of cloth to dry the pen off between cleanings. I did use some Lawn Fawn Licorice black ink, I think it is, and it's a dye ink. So as you see, when I start coloring, you will see that it does bleed a little bit. Now I did stamp this yesterday, so it had a day to dry the ink, but I think because it's a dye ink, it has the potential to pick up and reactivate. If you don't want that to happen, then you could probably use like a StazOn, something that's a permanent ink. So I'm going to start out with yellow, and I'm just going to start coloring some of the honeycomb looking shapes, and I'll just pick random ones. You'll see I dipped it in and it did fill up the nib. There's some grooves on the nib in which the ink kind of glides into, and as you use the ink up, it will pull off the nib. So eventually the nib will start getting less bright because there's less ink on it. I've also tested to see kind of how far will it go, how much ink in the nib, and how far will the ink go to come off. So right here I've only colored in 2 of those shapes, and I still have quite a bit of ink on there, but I did redip it to replenish the ink. So I'll just continue to color these in. Okay, so what I actually did notice here was when there was a lot of ink on touching the black outline, it did reactivate it and it did pull it in. So you did get some black into the yellow color. I also smudged it because I reached across when it wasn't dry and I smudged an area of the yellow. I would say that maybe this effect might be good if you're trying to get a shadow effect, but then you'd kind of want to plan your ink a little better to determine what kind of shadow you want. If you want, like for yellow, you usually want to do a brown ink to create a shadow, so maybe stamp it in brown instead. So on here though, what I've done is I've moved on to the red. And what I noticed is when you first dip the nib, it actually fills up quite a bit. So when you're coloring a small area like those hearts, it drops a lot of ink down and it can tend to bleed out. So what I was doing here was I dropped a lot of ink on the first heart, and I didn't take it all the way to the edge of the line. Instead, I dropped some in, moved on to another heart, and moved on. And then I was actually able to pick that ink back up. So when the first heart still had too much ink, I just put my nib back on it and pulled the ink back into the nib. Another thing that I actually learned too was when you need just a little bit of ink, you can actually take the dip pen and rub it along the rim of the ink jar, and it will suck that ink, that little bit of ink that got there from when you shook it, it will actually soak back up into your nib. So you can see here how I go around the rim of the ink jar and I just picked up a little bit of ink. That's all that I needed. So that was kind of fun, kind of cool, because I tend to be a little stingy with my art supplies and I want them to last me a really long time, so I'll scoop paint back into the jar and stuff, because not that it's expensive, it's just I like to save it. Get as far as you can. So here I'm just going to do some more lines. These are actually, I'm just doing some cross hatching. See what kind of, is it going to bleed and the lines won't show cross hatching and all of a sudden it will fill in too much? I'm not sure. So I wanted to see if I laid the lines down, will they stay separated or will they all blend together? So that's what I kind of tried on those honeycombs. Give it also another coloring variation. Like instead of it being filled in completely, those crosshatch lines are going to give it a softer yellow color because more of the white is coming through. So now I've actually moved on. I wanted to test the line variation. How far can I stretch the ink in the nib? And so I wanted to do just some lines. I wanted to see how thick they would be. I wanted to see how close I could get them. Are they shaky? Do they come out nice and crisp? Now, granted, some of it has to do with your hand steadiness, and on occasion your hand can be shaky, especially if you have a lot of coffee in the morning, like I tend to do. But it also adds character if it's shaky anyway, so I didn't necessarily mind that. And what I did find was that I really liked how it drew lines. They didn't look like they came out of a printer. I mean, they look like I hand drew the lines, but that was kind of the look I was going for anyway. So I was actually pretty pleased with that, and I was actually pretty pleased with how much of the lines I could get done before I had to re-dip the pen. So it does hold quite a bit of ink. And you can vary that. I mean, if you don't dip the pen in as far, it won't hold as much ink. You can dip it in further. I kind of got to a point where I just dipped it in halfway most of the time. I never tested dipping the whole nib in or anything like that. What I would be worried about is if I dipped the whole nib in, I would actually be worried that the ink would start drying before I used it all up. And sometimes when you do that, the ink can become sticky and then it won't come off, or it won't pull in more ink, and then you do have to clean the nib off. So I'm just going to finish up this line work here. And okay, so it looks like I'm about done with the card, and what I'm trying to point out was how it did bleed. That spot, that's where I ran my hand through it on accident when it was wet, and then that spot is where it actually reactivated the black ink. So like I said, if that bothers you, then I would use a StazOn or a permanent ink. Now I'm just going to turn this into a card real quick. Like I said, I stamped it the day before, and so the ink should have dried, but I think because of the type it is, it bled. So I'll just turn this into a quick little card and put it with my stash and add it to all my other cards. But I thought it was a good test. I was really pleased with the colors. I was really pleased with how the ink covered, and that it just was something other than just stamping it and coloring it with markers or something like that. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and I will leave you to watching the rest of the card making. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you come back again, because I have like 3 more videos I'm going to show using this pen, so those will be coming up soon.